This session explores the Gospel of Mark, which many scholars believe was the first gospel written. It is actually from Mark that we get the term gospel. This book was not written by an apostle, one of the key 12 disciples that Jesus led during his ministry, but was written by a close friend of an apostle. After Jesus' death, these 12 men are actually called apostles instead of disciples. Mark was an early convert to Christianity and is said to have served with the apostle Peter in Rome. Because of this, his gospel is said to be based on Peter's preaching. Mark's gospel is direct and to the point. It is focused specifically on Christ's ministry and the effect it had on people. This emphasis is seen in several ways. First, note what Mark does not talk about. In the beginning of the gospel, and comparing Mark to Matthew, you may have noticed that Mark spends no time on Jesus' birth and childhood. Second, in the ending of the book, Mark also stresses Christ's ministry. Mark does not talk about the resurrection or ascension of Jesus to heaven like the other Gospels. It is the absence of this material that probably caused the unknown writer to add the longer ending, thinking that the original ending was cut off by someone. Third, Mark is trying to get across a specific point in the words he uses. In the second set of verses that you read, did you notice the repeated use of the term immediately? This Gospel's concept of time is very fast-paced. Things happen quickly, not at a leisurely pace. There is no time to think, and people respond to Jesus immediately. Mark is trying to tell us that the message and actions of Jesus, even now, require people to respond immediately. Our response can be positive or negative, but we need to act instantly without hesitation. Mark tells the story of Christ from the perspective of how people responded to him, not just when they responded. The third set of verses you read explored this idea. Did you see a commonality in how people responded to what Jesus did? They were amazed, astonished, and in disbelief. The word amazement in the book of Mark is not positive like many cultures may assume, but is actually negative. When the people were amazed or astonished, they were scared and had no way to understand what was going on. It was not just what Jesus did that amazed or frightened them, it was also what he taught. Everyone was amazed. This includes the disciples, not just the masses. In fact, in Mark's gospel, the only ones not amazed by Jesus are the demons. They aren't amazed because they fully understand who Jesus is, the Son of God. The fourth set of passages you read revealed another important theme in Mark's gospel. Did you find it peculiar that Jesus always told people not to tell others about what they had seen or heard? This is called the Messianic Secret. It is present in the other synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but is by far the strongest in the book of Mark. Over and over, Jesus tells people to be silent about what he has done or said. Why does he do this? Is Jesus using reverse psychology, hoping that people will in fact go tell? No, actually. He's got another purpose in mind. We get a clue as to why this happens when Jesus does not tell the man to be quiet in Mark chapter 5 verses 1 through 20. This section is known as the story of the Gerasene demoniac. It is called this because the demon-possessed man comes from an area called Gerasenes. Remember how Jesus crosses the Sea of Galilee and upon getting out of the boat is met by a demon-possessed man? He casts the demons out of the man into some pigs, which promptly throw themselves off a cliff and drown. The local people, frightened by what happened, demand that Jesus leave. If he would have left, no one would have been able to encounter Christ. The man healed of the demon wants to go with Jesus. But here Jesus tells him to stay and tell his story. This helps us understand that part of the reason for the Messianic Secret is to encourage people to form their opinion of who Christ is based on their encounter with him. There was a lot of talk about the Messiah in the time and place Jesus ministered on earth, so there was potential for misinformation. Forcing people to have their own encounter with Jesus meant that they would have to make up their own mind, forming a first-hand faith in Christ. Going back to the story, it ends powerfully. When the man went to tell others about Jesus, the people were amazed or astonished by him. Fully understanding this gospel does not take place until we take into account the ending. Remember that the gospel originally ended at chapter 16, verse 8. The ending was so abrupt for someone, an unknown writer, that they felt surely there must be more, and added material to make it a nice, neat ending like the other Gospels. However, this is not the point of the original ending. When we think about the way the Gospel of Mark originally ended, and what we know about how Mark has told his story so far, it all starts to come together. The women come and see an empty tomb. A person, probably an angel, comes and tells them not to be amazed or frightened, but to go tell others what has happened. Jesus has risen as he said he would. However, the women do the opposite and are so amazed or frightened that they tell no one. The ending forces us to make a decision as to who Jesus is. Jesus demonstrates his identity through his teachings and miracles. And that decision, if you remember the sense of time in this gospel, must come immediately. Furthermore, if you understand who Jesus is and are not amazed, then you will tell others. Just like the story in chapter 5 of the demon-possessed man who was told to go and tell of his experience with Jesus, when you tell others about Christ, they have the choice to either embrace Christ or be amazed. Either way, we must make a choice as to who Jesus is. There is no time for reflection. There is no middle ground. If we choose Christ, then we are obligated to go tell others in a similar way. For now, answer the relational questions and see how you can grow by studying Mark's Gospel.